read who's coming and who they are would go, oh, I mean, they're just too important to care about us. They're too high up on the ladder to care about us. Well, these are our allies of women in motorsports, allies of trying to grow the sport who care. And they're just really what I call the good guys. There's a lot of them, more than just here, but I'm going to introduce you to the best good guys that I could find that I knew would really be able to hit the nail on the head of what we want to talk about. First up, John Doonan. I hope he's still around here. John Doonan is the president of the International Motorsports Association. Prior to leading IMSA, John had a 17-year career at Mazda, where he led the direction of, I gotta read this. I mean, I know it, but the brand's commitment to international motorsports from grassroots through the Mazda Speed program, including Spec Miatas and SCCA, NASA, and ultimately to the professional MX-5 Cup Series, and was instrumental in the formation of the Mazda Road to Indy. John is one of the most well-respected members in the IMSA paddock and in motorsports, and highly regarded by sports executives, drivers, teams, and fans. And oh, by the way, he is a member of the Women in Motorsports North America Working Group. And thank you, John, for supporting the Women with Drive by co-sponsoring tonight's fundraiser, where there will be 25 female drivers representing and 17 race cars, from Janet Guthrie's last IndyCar that was restored by Ray Everham to 8-year-old Samantha Polk with her quarter midget winning car from Darlington. Thank you, John. Jimmie Johnson doesn't probably need an introduction, but 7-time NASCAR Cup Series champion, one of the most accomplished and decorated professional athletes of this era. And for the last 2 years, driver of the Chip Ganassi, Carvana, and the NTT IndyCar Series. Away from the track, Jimmie focuses on his family and his daughters, plus his rigorous fitness regime. Jimmie also focuses on the Jimmie Johnson Foundation, which is dedicated to helping children, families, and communities in need, and has donated more than $12 million to various organizations involving children and public education. And Jimmie is also one of the original members of the Women in Motorsports North America Working Group. Thank you, Jimmie. Another Jim Jordan, the director, the TC America director of the SRO. Jim had a long career at Mazda, worked a lot with John Doonan in various roles before moving into the Mazda Motorsports, where he worked with John Doonan in the creation of the Mazda Road to Indy program and the Mazda Motorsports Ladder System, one of the best grassroots support programs for customer racing in history. Jim is now working closely with the Gazoo Racing TRD to develop their recently announced Toyota GR Cup Series. What is most exciting about the GR Cup is the role as a young driver development series is the bonus program for the top finishing women racers. Jim also serves on the Women in Motorsports North American Working Group. Tony Parella, president of Trans Am and SVRA. Tony, founder of the Parella Group and president of the CEO of the SVRA, and the owner of the Trans Am Race Company, which operates the Trans Am Series. Tony spent 30 years in the telecommunications business, including the president of Shared Technologies, which made the Fortune magazine top 100 places to work 4 consecutive years in a row, and he is a graduate of the Harvard Business School's Advanced Managing Program. He's also the author of a book, which is kind of how I got to not know Tony but respect him, is that he wrote a book called Fractured to Fortune. And it really gives insight, taking a company that was fractured, turning it into a fortune, but about his value of people. And so just thank you very much, Tony. Steve Phelps, president of NASCAR. First, again, Steve, thank you for supporting Women with Drive as a co-sponsor of tonight's fundraiser. Steve has served as NASCAR's president since 2018 and has been with the sanctioning body since 2005, when he served as vice president of corporate marketing. He has pioneered important growth initiatives during his tenure as president and is the leading voice in the national conversation on racial equality and social justice, rallying the NASCAR industry to reaffirm its commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion. Steve helped with the creation of the NASCAR Drive for Diversity campaign, which began in 2009 and is under the leadership of Rev Racing. In recognition of his leadership elevating the sport through the challenges of 2020, God knows we all went through those, Phelps was named a finalist for the Sports Business Journal's Executive of the Year. Thank you, Steve. Heyward Wagner from SCCA. He's the Senior Director of Rally, Solo, and Experiential Programs in SCCA. In 2010, he joined the SCCA National Solo staff, and in 2012 put his former SCCA competition experiences together to form the Tire Rack SCCA Starting Line School. He also helped form SCCA's Track Night in America, which is 150 events a year of non-competitive track day experiences at more than 30 tracks between March and October every year. So, allies. Got a whole podium here of allies. What is an ally? You know, I didn't have a formal word for it, and I attended a seminar, was last year, virtual, with the FIA Women in Motorsports Commission. And one of these sort of marketing experts came up and said, without the clear support of men, equality for women cannot be met. And that's what allyship is. I was like, wow, I mean, I kind of instinctively knew this in my gut. At the same time, I'd never put a formal word on it, and to have some marketing guru say internationally this was what you needed. So I'm going to just share, to me, what an ally is. It's men and women, by the way. We need allies that are women as well, but in leadership. So they need to be in leadership positions. They listen with empathy. Listening is one thing, but if you don't have empathy to what you can tell when somebody's looking in their eyes, you can tell whether they really are listening and whether they have empathy. And to learn and understand, everybody's life has a different experience, and if they haven't had the experience that you've had, then they have to come around and actually start to understand. You get a sense that they're trying to understand. And then give you advice, guidance, and maybe mentorship. And then take action with support and show up. And some people that showed up in my life, sorry guys, I had to share this. Some allies that I've had over the years, Walter Hayes at Ford Motor Company, who was then the vice president of Ford in his public affairs. I met him before, that it was helpful to be able to get in with Ford, but he was an ally throughout my tenure of racing for Ford. John Bishop from IMSA. When I saw John and Peggy and I was racing in IMSA just as a little local racer trying to come there, and then I found out when they started the Kelly American Challenge Series, some car owner from Oklahoma called and said, because they announced that there would be a bonus prize money for the top finishing female driver. Were there any female drivers he could put in the car? And John Bishop said, yeah, Lyn St. James, she drives like a man. And John was always there, a voice, I mean, he owned IMSA. He had everybody coming at him from every angle, but he always gave me time. Mike Helton, the big guy in town. Is he still here? So, everybody's afraid of Mike, right? I mean, nobody wants to be in the trailer from Mike who calls you to the trailer. But before I ever did Indy, before I was, people say it's easy, Lyn, you're Lyn St. James. No, before I was anything, Mike would listen. He would just listen to me, and he always gave me some advice. And then he showed up. Every driver, Women in the Winner's Circle luncheon we did, Mike would show up. So he's not that fearful. He's not that tough. And Leo Mell from Goodyear. Leo is a character. He's retired now, so most of you in this room don't maybe know who he is. You should research him, but he was the head of Goodyear Worldwide Racing for tires for forever. And, Leo was he was always there, and he would always listen. And he would tell great stories. And every once in a while, I got a free set of tires. So those were allies that I had in my career. There were many others, but those were ones that, that I get, when I'm mentoring, I get so upset that people tell me they can't go to these people, they can't talk to these people. You can talk to these people, they're human beings. So never think anybody's so important or so high up that you couldn't go. But when you do, make sure you make eye contact and you shake their hands. John Doonan, Road to Indy.
I thought Heyward would be on pole position since he's first.
No.
That's how it works on the talk shows at night, doesn't
You
it?
took the wrong seat. You were supposed to go
got
alphabetically
it.
down the line, but you messed that up. 75% of the Indy 500 field over the last number of years came through the Mazda Road to Indy. They were graduates of that. Are you always such a nice guy, or you really have had this sort of grassroots belief, and I know your passion. But what was your thinking on how to create this whole Road to Indy or this grassroots?
Well, my buddy Jim Jordan and I sat at Robert Davis's kitchen table and actually drew that up on a napkin, and some of it was by accident, frankly. But I think we had a car company at the time that was being run by a bunch of racers, which is probably the best car company to ever work for. And there's many here today, car companies that are run by racers, but we knew as racers how expensive it was to do anything in the sport. And we said, we ought to put our money where our mouth is. We have strong grassroots programs in SCCA, and we ought to give drivers that have the talent, but maybe not the resources, what they need. And that's really how it all came together. And then on the open wheel side, Skip Barber, who's now a partner of IMSA, they needed an engine partner, and so we did that. The Atlantic series at the time, you've driven Atlantics, of course, Lyn, and they needed an engine supplier. So all the pieces fit into place, but the real backbone of it was us as a group wanting to do what was right for the sport.
How did you convince, though, the company to, because I imagine it wasn't a win on Sunday, sell on Monday belief.
Should I take this, John?
Well, there's a group of finance folks that I think are still shaking their heads. But we really, at the time, and it is a credit to Jim, the average age buyer of Mazdas at the time was right around 40 years old. And so pretty much our message was we need to continue to find the next pipeline of brand advocates. And so it was authentically that.
So they kind of found a sweet spot.
Absolutely.
Do you want to run with that, Mr. Jordan?
No, I don't want to steal anybody's thunder, but
No,
just a little background. John and I conspired so much around kitchen tables and around to build just an amazing program. And one of the things that made it work was John was on the operations side. I worked in the marketing department of Mazda North America. And it was basically a shared vision. So the one thing I just want to say, one of my favorite John memories was there were four of us leaving the 24 Hours of Daytona in a car that we borrowed from a dealership because we had no budget to rent a car, with the friggin' trophy in the middle of the back seat looking at every other manufactured big truck, and it was just the four of us. And it was just, if you have a shared vision and passion and are willing to work hard, you could do anything. And that's what, again, John and I have many proud moments together. We could be here all afternoon, but that's one of them.
So in a sense, you were allies with each other too. And there's that collaboration and you can't do it alone, right? Right.
Absolutely.
Jimmie, in your 40 years,
Yeah.
you've been around a long time.
Yeah, I started racing early too.
I know. I think I read 7 years old or.
Started at 5,
At
so
5.
42 years of racing now. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah,
It's funny how that clock keeps ticking and the age keeps going up.
He looks like he's 40.
Thanks for letting the gray come in.
Yeah,
Of course,
I can't hide it anymore. It's
but
coming in too
I'm
quick.
still after you about taking my record at Indy, but that's all right.
Yes. Not by much though, right?
No, not by much.
Do we want to share what that glorious...
Since 1992, one of the records that I held that I never was proud of until many years later was that I held the record for being the oldest rookie in the history of the Indy 500, which played well with audiences, And then I knew that when Jimmie was going to run Indy, saw that he was 46 years old, and then I'm like,
Yep.
I knew you were going to get it. I'm like, damn it. I was cheering for you, but.
But I know we had a great laugh over that one
Yeah,
when
we
you brought
did.
that to my attention.
So, but the changes you've seen, from off-road racing to stock car racing and now in IndyCar racing, and particularly maybe relative to women that you've either worked with or I know you've seen some competing, but changes from whatever early years you want to pick to
Right.
what you now see now. Could you kind of give us your perspective on that?
Yeah, I would definitely say that in IndyCar, not necessarily IndyCar, but later in my career, there has been more diversity from race and gender, from both sides. And my opinion, watching it all as a racer coming through the ranks, in some ways has really been a numbers game. We all know how difficult it is to grow up with a race car or a dirt bike or a motorsport in your backyard. And it really does take family that one can afford it, or two, parents that are mechanically inclined that can kind of work on the vehicle and help get you going. And that was certainly my case. But it's really been nice to see over the last 5 or 10 years just the growing increase of women working within motorsports behind the wheel. I grew up as a young kid watching you race and a big fan of yours. You gave us all a big scare at Riverside. That was our home track. So as I told you before, that was one of our few moments to see high-level racing on the West Coast. But I really think that where it is today, it's trending in a much better direction. And my last 2 years at Chip Ganassi Racing, seeing so many sharp, qualified women show up on our engineering staff. I would say 50%, half the cars at CGR were engineered by females. And as I was winding down this year, there was a bunch of young ladies coming on board, sitting as second engineers and learning the ropes and coming along. So it is changing. It just takes time, unfortunately, but it's great to see the motorsports community so open to providing these opportunities and giving that chance.
What advice would you talked about dads though, how they're I always say it's dads and daughters, it's an opportunity, but
Yeah.
Since you are, any advice, you're a dad yourself, and I'm not going to put the pressure about your girls want to go racing, but just advice you could give to dads. Of daughters.
Daughters. Oh, okay. First, I was going to say it's just passion. Like if you're an individual trying to make it into motorsports, when a team manager, team owner, team president, whoever it may be, when they know you're serious and they see that passion in your eyes, I want to believe that they don't care about your skin color or your gender, that they just see somebody that's hungry and ready to work. As a father and encouraging other fathers, it kind of falls into that same category where I'm just trying to put as much as I can in front of my daughters and see what they are passionate about. Right now, I have one that's very interested in horses, and Aaron's aware of this. We get to see each other at the local horse shows occasionally. And then I have my youngest daughter, Lydia, who does ride, but it's more that her sister does it. But she looks like a cowgirl on this equestrian horse. And I don't think it's her calling per se, and she's now looking at other more physical activities, but just trying to find something they're passionate about is really what we're doing in our house.
And support the passion, but
Correct.
From some parents I've dealt with, though, is the passion needs to be from the kids and not their passion.
Without a doubt. And within motorsports, and certainly motocross, there's a big fear factor in the way that I grew up racing dirt bikes. There are numerous fathers positioned around the racetrack encouraging their kids to jump double jumps at big obstacles that kids didn't want to jump. And I was so thankful that my parents were very relaxed about it. And I was always self-motivated. I have 2 younger brothers, and my middle brother oftentimes wouldn't even be at the starting gate for his race because he'd rather play in the creek and build mud pies. So, I was very fortunate to grow up in that environment of if you're passionate about it, let's do it and we'll support you. And not my parents' passion trying to live through me.
Thank you. So back to Jim, to the Mazda, but now also with your SRO and lots happening. Can you explain a little bit what SRO is? I mean, no offense, but I think we all know what IMSA is. And SRO is even new to me right now. So if you could maybe take a moment and then lead
no
into,
problem.
Yeah.
And what Shay talked about when she won the race at Long Beach, we used to run something called the Parella World Challenge. And we were part of SCCA Pro Racing at that time. And I'll say one thing that I'm also proud of, another John Doonan and Jim Jordan story, was when Shay won that race, the first 2 people in victory lane to greet her were John and I, giving her just big hugs and high fives. And she was racing a Honda.
Yeah, she finally started racing Mazdas like 2 years ago. Finally is right.
But the SRO, we're actually the world's largest producer of GT racing. So we're much more well-known elsewhere in the world than we are in North America. We actually, Stefan Rattel, who's the SR of the SRO, created the crazy GT1 cars back in the late 90s, or was it 80s? I know John and I rode the first Petite Le Mans, had the famous blowover picture of that Porsche that they showed 1,000 times when I watched last weekend. That was a class that Stefan Rattel created. The GT3 cars he created, the GT4 cars he created. So in GT racing, he's truly a genius, brilliant guy. So his big goal is to take over the world of GT racing. So he bought out Parella World Challenge, and we're now one of his organizations. But he runs, or he has GT racing series in Asia. We actually run a race in Africa, so we're on all the continents, but we're focused on GT racing. No prototypes, no open wheel. It's all GT racing, and mostly focused on custom racing. So I hope that helps a little bit.
So how many women, because I follow women in motorsports globally as well, how many women roughly that are competing in?
Yeah, so we have one woman fighting for the championship in Indianapolis, Ashton Harrison, who John knows because she came up through the Mazda series somewhat. Then she switched to Honda. I'm not sure who knew or who paid attention to the Iron Doms. Is anyone here a fan of the Iron Doms?
Yeah.
So they just won the 24 Hours of Spa, which is the biggest GT race in the world. So an all-woman team running a pink Ferrari. I will say the SRO, we're extremely women-centric. Our COO is a woman. Our CFO is a woman. Basically, the number 2 person in North America is a woman. The joke internally, Stacy Langham, who some of you may know, the joke internally is that SRO stands for Stacy Run Organization. We haven't told Stefan that, so that's our little secret, okay? Don't let that get out. But again, very well known worldwide, but not as well known in the U.S. But again, I like to think that John and my relationship helps because we cooperate really well with IMSA. We run on some of the same tracks that the ownership of NASCAR owns. We're focused on a different business model than they are, and I think it benefits the whole sport.
Thank you. Tony Parella, you have come into this racing world as first a competitor, a fan of the sport, and now running the business with Trans Am and other SCCA properties. So you've given some scholarships, I know. So, I mean, you're trying to help support the system. In vintage racing, it's pretty much whatever competitor owns a car that can come and play in your sandbox. But Trans Am, I know, has had great success with female champions and female winners. So what, other than the scholarships, which is great, are you seeing more women competing in every aspect of it?
I am seeing some growth. I'm not seeing enough growth, frankly. In the Trans Am race series, we have 3 active competitors that are female right now. Cindy Lux in our GT group, Michelle Abadi in our TA2 class, and of course Amy Ruman, 2-time champion. So there are pillars, if you will, but I think in order for us to have a real significant growth, we're going to need to go back a step on the grassroots amateur level to get more females involved and frankly more kids of color involved to really have a diverse sport. We are, as our overall umbrella, we've offered 3 scholarships a year in our Formula 4 and Formula Regional, where our company pays for the entries for the season and gets a deal with tires and some other add-ons. But we're working on a much bigger program that will fully fund the rides rather than just the entries, because frankly, giving away a free entry if they don't have the money for the right car prep, you're not going anywhere. So I'm proud of the fact one of our graduates, Ernie Francis Jr., kid of color, made it to Indy Lights this year. Chloe Chambers made it to the W Series. So but it seems like for the scale that I usually think about, we need to go faster, for lack of better words.
Well, I think to sort of validate what you just said, I know that Emily, I think it was Emily Lyn St, who, was actually showing fairly well and then couldn't finish the season in F4, because they didn't have the funding. So, it's much as we would love to have this sort of incentive program or, some kind of but if you can't afford to be in the game, then an incentive doesn't really help an awful lot. So it's a tricky, chicken and egg situation. So I know you'll be thinking about trying to figure out how to fix that.
For sure.
Mr. Phelps, I know that I've known you a long time, and I know that you actually are not only an executive with all of this high executive experience, but I was amazed when I found out, you were in New York, and when I introduced you to Julia Landauer, and I think you had family that was go-kart racing, and it was like there was this sort of, oh my God, he's a racer, he's not just an executive that came in. But your ability to stand apart to a certain degree and stand for diversity and within NASCAR, I mean, you had a huge challenge, let's face it. I mean, culturally, the sport has its grassroots, and it has its position that it's been for decades, and now we're in a different climate, in a different world. A lot of guts to be able to do what you've done. So can you share, what do you have a vision for where you want to go with some of this beyond, what's happened so far? And because obviously every young driver that's ever come through my driver development program, it amazes me, almost everyone wants to get to NASCAR. And yet we just have this, we're stuck. I don't know why we're stuck, that we can't get them out of maybe. So I'd love to hear if you've got any thoughts about that.
Well, I would think of it in a couple different ways. So is there a vision? Yes, I think we at NASCAR have a vision for the importance of diversity, equity, inclusion. It kind of has three pillars to it. I'll get to the participation thing in a second. One is internal, because if we can't do it ourselves, why should we expect anyone else in the industry to do it as well? So that's hiring practices, that's training of people with understanding how other people feel, think. I mean, we had a situation in 2020 with Bubba Wallace where we had countless people went by a pull-down fashion as a noose at Talladega, and no one said anything. And it took a crew member on what was then the 43 car, Bubba Wallace's car, to say, there's a noose in this young man's garage. And that was on the heels of banning the Confederate flag and the stance on social justice after what happened with George Floyd and kind of the social reckoning that happened. And it kind of gets to what's the responsibility of a sanctioning body or a league. And we tried to thread the needle with great support from people who worked at NASCAR, either currently or at the time, that said, we can make a difference here, right? And I think there was this idea, if NASCAR can make a difference, couldn't anyone? Which I'm not exactly sure how I feel about that, but we heard that repeatedly. And so the internal component of that was important. The second piece was what we do from an industry standpoint. And then the third pillar really is around what can we do with relationships or partnerships that we have. But the internal piece was the most important. So not only have we changed our hiring practices, and it is critical that every management position that we're hiring is looking at a person of color, is looking at women. We've got to advance the work that we're doing in the space, and I'm proud to say we're doing it. So we have to bring the rest of the industry along. Another component to that is we have employee resource groups, and we have some people here that are on those employee resource groups. One, the Bell Navis Collective, NASCAR Unidos, our Pride Plus group, and then WIN, Women in NASCAR, to have people understand there are allies that want to stand with you in how you identify within those particular groups. It's important to us, and it's making a difference. The industry thing, we have an industry diversity council. and which are a number of people in here are part of it. Jill Gregory from Sonoma Raceway. We've got our OEM partners. We've got people from Fox. We've got NBC. We've got all of our OEs that are part of it. It's important that the industry feels culpability and feels a part of the solution to where this sport's going to go. And diversity, equity, inclusion is a very, very important part of what the future looks like. And again, but if you can't get it done internally with your own industry, how do you expect to have brand new fans coming into the sport, right? So for us, not only have we changed perception of our brand and a relevance to the brand that the brand, frankly, hasn't experienced in a couple of decades, and how that looks is completely different, right? What does NASCAR stand for? So the DNA of NASCAR hasn't changed, which is about, maverick brand and competitive and just great racing. But who is welcome to participate in NASCAR has completely changed. And we're seeing that in frankly, our numbers. Not just people who are working at NASCAR, but people who want to participate in NASCAR. And fandom specifically. As it relates to participation, we have a program that you talked about, Lyn, Drive for Diversity, which has been around for a long time. I'd like to take credit for that. It wasn't my idea. I'm thrilled we did it. We've got 3 graduates of that program who race at our top level. And they're all NASCAR Cup Series winners. Kyle Larson, Bubba Wallace, and Daniel Suarez. Important that we continue those things. And it's just not on the driver participation standpoint. The number of people that have come out of the crewing portion of that is significant. We're a sport that at NASCAR, we've got 100 drivers in our 3 national series, roughly. Not a lot of seats. And you have people that can be competitive for a significant number of career. In the NFL, if you're a running back, the average running back has 3.5 years, right? And they're out. We fortunately have, guys that are here for decades that are able to build their brand and their name and their 7 championships and 84 wins and on and on and on. So we miss you, brother. I could go on for a while, but I know we're short on time.
Well, but is there something, you have success, like you said, in the diversity area. And I know Brianna, from the crew standpoint, but do you have any idea what we can do better to get more women? I wasn't gonna put you on the spot.
You have to be very intentional about what we're doing here, right? Yeah. And so, as we're looking for those that are, getting into the into that specific program, it's not a panacea for sure, right? No. There are other avenues, right? Julie and I talked before, there are other avenues that people are going through, or women are going through, to get to, to be racing in our national series. But it is having a commitment to do it. We've all talked about funding and the importance of funding. Listen, it's a lot more expensive to go racing than it is to pick up a basketball, right? If you are the best basketball player on the planet, you're going to play in the NBA. If you are the best race car driver in the world, are you going to be at NASCAR? Are you going to be in F1? Are you going to be in IndyCar? Are you going to be in IMSA or where? I don't know.
Well, if you're the fastest, you can take the pick. But right. I'm going to ask you at some point, if there's in the future, to be able to get with like team owners or team managers, though, to have some kind of a discussion about this.
Lyn, I think it's an important discussion that needs to happen, because if you think about it, we talk about leading from the front. We have to convince the rest of our industry, right? So this Industry Diversity Council is fantastic. We have to convince the rest of the industry that being intentional about hiring women and people of color and promoting them throughout the ranks is good business. That's what it is.
And it's possible.
Business. And it's possible.
Yeah.
And we're seeing those results, but we have to continue with that. You can't just say, hey, this is something we aspire to do. We talked about getting younger and more diverse for 15 years.
Yeah.
And you know what? It took a flashpoint and a different thought process and being committed to it to make a difference.
It's about timing, and now is the time.
It is.
I mean,
Agreed.
yeah, absolutely. So I just, I'm offering that up, because I think there's the opportunity. This is the time. This is the time. Thank you. So, yes, Heyward. Sorry. Grassroots is where I'm not trying to put SCCA only in the grassroots candidate, but I think that it's where people start. It's where I started, in a Ford Pinto. So this track night, I know you've hundreds, thousands of people have come through that, and you have a whole SCCA Women on Track program, which is really was what I understand was not necessarily intended just for race car drivers. It was more just for women in the whole SCCA, membership base, so that everybody. I still have this theory, by the way, that women need to be invited, men show up. Guys will go to a party whether they've been invited or not. Women, oh no, we can't do that. We weren't invited, right? So I felt like the SCCA Women on Track is like this invitation for women. So how is SCCA doing in that area? And about is your track night converting well?
Well, I want to start by just saying that I was really confused about why I was on this panel, until you.
It's only because Mike Cobb wasn't available.
Well,
I'm sorry.
Well, then you explained that the point of this was to show that anyone can talk with important people, and now I know what I'm here to exemplify. So, thank you for giving me the opportunity. And also, I want to say you're welcome to everyone up here who now has an SCCA property and being successful with it. So, so Track Night was born 8 years ago, and the concept was very simple: that access to motorsports was too challenging in North America. And the short summary of that is, if you tell people to meet you at Charlotte Motor Speedway, is it this gate, is it that gate, is the one in the back, where do I park, where do I go? There's all of this incredible institutional knowledge that does not flow through our sport. And that's just a gate, like never mind funding and sponsorship and setup and all of these things that people hold really, really tight. And what happens if we kind of kick these doors open and build a program that's designed for people who can buy it now and find a dot on Google Maps? Can we get them on a racetrack? And almost 10 years later, we've put 60,000 people on racetracks, in street cars, driven by the concept that if you can give people a good experience, if you can give them access, they'll come back. And where we found out that we were missing was this idea that access was the key, that access, just kick the gates open, everybody's going to come in. And you stole my line, actually. We kicked the gates open and the men flooded in and the women waited to be invited. And Women on Track has been a really great tool to help with that invitation. But what we're trying to do, number one, to the point made a moment ago, one of the first things SCCA had to do before we could do any of that was we had to clean up our own house. We had to deal with the guys who were giving out trophies at the end of the event that was wearing a T-shirt that was incredibly offensive to some populations. We had to deal with, we have a member of staff who deals with members behaving badly, and I would say 80% of what he deals with are men being unfortunate in their treatment of women. We had to start dealing with that. We had to start talking about that. We had to start telling people that they weren't welcome in our environment and building a welcoming environment. Then we had to figure out access. And now that we've worked on a welcoming environment and we're not done, and now that we've worked on access and we're not done, I think the most important word that I've heard here that we're working on now is inclusion. The difference between access and inclusion is access is kicking the door open. Inclusion is saying, come on in. There's room for you. We want you here. And that's really where we're focused on our grassroots efforts. Track Night, just to give you some ideas of numbers and where I see with all this, Track Night runs at about 5% female participation on track. It's about 25% female participation as staffing. So when we're intentional and we go out and find people like Renee and say, hey, come be a Track Night coach, we get women involved, we get women engaged, we're able to model that C that we were talking about before. We're able to capture that, but when we just say whoever wants to show up, we see almost universally in the club about a 5% take rate. So our goal right now, through Women on Track and other initiatives, is to do a better job of being inviting and inclusive as opposed to just being accessible.
Thank you. And one of those pieces too is women don't necessarily, because how many times I've been, oh, we're going to have a women's only event. Women don't just want to be with other women. I mean, it does. You don't have to invite them the Women's Day or whatever. That it's really though extending the invitation to women and making them feel welcome.
So we're actually having a fascinating conversation about that right now. In SCCA Autocross, we have had since 1979 open classes that anyone can participate in. And ladies' class is restricted to people who have an F on their driver's license. And don't get me started on what kind of a nightmare that's been to unwind. But what we found is that, there is this, we've been having this conversation all year about, are we doing it right? Are we doing ladies' classes right? Is this the right way to do parallel classing? And the thing that we have really come to is that if you watch women's soccer, it's very common when a goal is scored 10 seconds later to have some level of uncertainty of who scored that goal. But men's soccer, when there's a goal scored, there is no doubt who scored that goal. And we don't know what to call that, but that energy, that difference.
Magic, yeah. It's magic.
Yeah, spark is the best we've come up with. I'll take magic. That is something that's very attractive to a percentage of people. But 35% of our women autocrossers run an open class. They want something different. They want to be in the big pond. And that navigating that path of, is it proper to have parallel classing for ladies? Is it appropriate in 2022? Is it essential? Is it necessary? What is it? What we find over and over and over again is there's a camaraderie, a magic, a spark, or something that is highly desirable. We just need to make sure that we're presenting it in a way that feels inclusive.
I just like it that we do see a lot of women now. I see a lot of women's names. I look at the names, in the overall. So it's good that you have a choice. So my background came through sports car racing, and a lot of this really is sports car racing, and I not go-karting because I didn't get to start then. But John, I mean, obviously IMSA's got a great history of success of women in racing. I mean, I go to Kathy Rude, Christina Nielsen, Catherine Legg, even back to Christine Beckers and Lella Lombardi, who I watched run the 24 Hours of Daytona. Courtney Crone, Sheena Monk recently, being successful. Taylor, winning a championship. Heart of Racing is now launching a potential search for a female driver. And even though it hasn't been announced, I know Kelly Moss is. So what do you got? I know you're going to kick this one until it makes a squeaking noise and we get a bunch of women winning championships. So tell us, please.
You're right, and we're very fortunate at IMSA to have the number of series in our portfolio, 10 championships, and it's developed into a little bit of what Jim and I had the chance to do in our past, and that's a very clear ladder system or a pyramid. So, Shay and her husband own and are part of an MX-5 Cup team, so that's your entry level. You have Ashton Harrison and Lamborghini Super Trofeo. You have what Victoria and the folks at Kelly Moss are doing in Carrera Cup. You have just recently announced what Heart of Racing is doing. And I am beating the drum, as you know, because you've been a huge ambassador of it. But we're going to have a female team in the IMSA WeatherTech Sports Car Championship. And I don't mean a female team just to have a team. We're going to have a team that wins a championship, that they're going to have the right resources behind them. Certainly the budget, but the engineering resources, the time on the simulator to make it a championship-winning effort. And Linda said something earlier that resonated with me when what does success look like, and when this isn't a topic, I agree with that 100%. But we're gonna put it on track and have a championship-winning effort in IMSA, certainly under my watch.
Thank you. I commend you for sticking this out because I know how hard it is, and particularly to have the resources, not just the money, but the right team and all of that. So,
we need partners, and
Yeah.
there are companies that have said to me, we need to use motorsport as the marketing platform to attract our next generation of female engineers in the workplace, not just in racing, but in energy companies and technology companies, and we can be a platform for that.
And the GR Cup, we didn't really talk about that because I know they have an award program. So can you share that, Jim?
Yeah, so there's a new program that Toyota has put together called the GR Cup as part of their Gazoo Racing program. And with the SRO, we're very fortunate and very excited to be helping Toyota with that program. And I will say a little confession. Almost the minute we were awarded the contract, my first email was to Cindy and Lyn saying, we got the contract and Toyota's putting up $5,000 to the fastest woman in every race. So, and I know Mobil One's a part of it, so thank you for being a part of that, Mobil One. Lyn, you shared with me at one point that early in your career in the IMSA series, that it was that little extra money from Kelly Services that put you on the map. So my hope is, in looking at the number of entries so far, I think we're going to have at least 5 women running in the series. Some John and I know from back in our Mazda days, and some who I don't know. I met one today, so that's good. But here's Toyota and Mobil One and other partners putting their money where their mouth is with the GR Cup. So it's a single make series. The cars are all being built right now up in Mooresville in a new facility that Toyota and GR Racing have put together. So it's a great program. If you're looking to get involved, please take a look at it. And hopefully, like I said, at least one woman here I met so far. But anyone else who's involved, I'll be around the rest of today and part of tomorrow before I head to Indianapolis tomorrow afternoon.
Thank you. So, and it isn't a one solution fits all. I mean, I think that's what's important to me is that everybody's doing something. You know, everybody's doing something to try to make a difference. And just on that, some programs that exist, Toyota with the GR Cup, Ford has a female engineer program, PNC Ganassi has the engineering internship program, Goodyear has a women's network, Mazda with their shootout scholarship with a $75,000 award for the top female in the shootout. The Next Gen internship scholarship you're going to hear from Michelle tomorrow. Honda HPD Academy, NASCAR Drive for Diversity at the Rev Racing program. Kelly Moss I mentioned, and the Heart of Racing. So I mean, those are just existing things happening now for women that, of course, are all for women drivers and engineers. So it isn't just for drivers. Jimmie, you got to go. Yeah, they told me.
I'm already? Okay.
Yeah, if you have any final comment, but they said you had to be out of here by
I do.
4:45.
Sorry to rush out. I'm going to be on Race Hub tonight, so I'm
Yeah.
excited to go
I
back
know.
and
I'm not letting everybody
do
else
some
off the
NASCAR
hook
work.
yet. But
So
Thank you.
I'm going to be on as a broadcaster tonight, so I'm excited about that.
yeah.
But just thank you
'Cause
for having me
have
on
a
the
book
panel.
out, which, by the way, I've
I do
ordered
have a
through
book.
Amazon. I hope some point you'll be able to
Amazon
order
is
it.
dropping the ball. It's been pushed back a little, but
I
it's
know.
coming. But
Okay.
the book's called One More Lap. It's a great book. It's more pictures than words, my type of book. So I hope everybody enjoys it. But
So-
thank you so much for having me on this panel. And I think the big takeaway for me, listening to everyone speak, you mentioned the invite, and I was going to say something along the lines of awareness, which is similar to an invite. As I'm seeing through Chip Ganassi's relationship with PNC and the engineers coming through our offices at that race shop, when women know that there's a safe environment to come and be a part of, that they're invited, that they want to be there, we need them there. It's really changed, I think, the approach and the intrigue and interest for others to come in. So on top of the invites, I think it's awareness too, and I credit you and all the hard work that you put into this to help get the awareness out, and everybody on this panel and everybody in this room that they continue to push so hard.
It's a group effort. Thank you. Thank
Absolutely.
you. I'm going to let
Thank
you
you, everybody.
scoot, take your bag. It's your gift.
Thank you.
Yeah. So, does anybody else have anything they want to add? Because I asked some specific questions, but if there's anything, yeah.
Yeah, this is one point I want to make to women looking for a career. There's opportunities at every level, and any career path you want, from marketing to sales to driving, and driving gets all the glamour. So, and that's one of the things in our calls. We always tease Lyn because she just wants to push driver. But it's much broader than that. And just like I shared with John before, a shared vision and having a little support system can pretty much take you anywhere you want to go. So again, anyone who wants to talk to me, I'll be here a while. And let's talk GR Cup and the opportunities there.
Thanks. Steve?
Just one thing. There's a group out of the University of Central Florida that does a race and gender report card.
Richard Lapchick.
Richard Lapkin, spoke to Richard yesterday. Richard has been a pioneer in this space, terrific man. NASCAR participated for the first time, and the reason why people don't know that is because we made it private. And the reason why we made it private is we are doing some terrific work. We knew our grades were not going to be what they should be, right? But you needed a baseline. I'm not going to tell you what those grades are because we're going to do better, right? One thing I will say is that the programs that we put in place over the last 2 years have gotten an A. We are committed to what we're doing in diversity, equity, inclusion. It's important, and you need to be intentional. Feel free not to tweet that about the grade because I'm still not going to tell you what the grades are, but and we're going to participate in that program again and again and again. We have to have the industry understand that getting the grades that we got and that baseline are unacceptable. And so what are we going to do to have more people of color and more women in our industry? It's a must.
I wanted to ask you about Richard Lapchick, but we didn't talk about that ahead of time, and I didn't want to put you on the spot. I've known Richard Lapchick through the Women's Sports Foundation and his program forever, and it's like the thing you can control was what your home organization, and if everybody took the leader, and I mean, he's available to do those things, and I know you pay good money to have his report card, and if you pay a little more, you can keep it private versus public. But it's what you're.
He was supportive of the private.
Yeah, but I mean, it's like, how else are you going to know?
The NHL was private too.
How else are you going to know?
Didn't say that out loud, did I? Sorry.
So thank you for sharing that, because that's when you know intention and action is in place. And I want to add, too, that Women in Motorsports North America, I mean, if you go to our website, which is the intention to have this be this portal of information, I mean, you mentioned something, Heyward, that, we've even, because John shared, some others have shared with their, their discrimination policies. I mean, a lot of race teams are small, organizations are small, vendors, suppliers and everything, and they don't have bulletin boards anymore that have those things up. And if women are not comfortable in the environment, and we know of instances where those aren't going to happen, then we aren't going to fix it. And so we're trying to be that safe zone, that safe place to provide that information. So, and if we do this together and share that information, then we'll eliminate some of those bad habits that were created culturally just because it was always guys and, it just was okay then. So, but God, I'm so glad you shared that, because when the resources are there and we don't use them, then shame on us, Do you have any questions from oh, yeah, okay. Right here. We've got a microphone. I'll let Tina will decide who to give it to.
Hi, my name's Jessie Hettinger. Sorry, that was loud. I'm probably mortifying my daughter right now, who's with me.
This is the mom.
Yep, I'm the mom. So Lyn put a quote up at the beginning. It said, without the clear support from men, women can't obtain equality, pretty much, right? We talked a lot today, or y'all did, about institutionalized programs that are going to help grow this, and it's awesome. It's all awesome. But what can happen for women in engineering or drivers or PR? How can they find an ally, or how do they connect with an ally at more of a personal level?
Yeah, go ahead, Tony.
I'll relate to my company to answer your question. I've been in the space 10 years. In fact, 2 weeks ago was my 10-year anniversary. At that event, my company at that time ran 3 races. This coming year we'll run 25. Over 80% of the employees in our company are women. 80. And here's what's interesting. That doesn't deserve applause, because without these women, I wouldn't have a company. And that is the gospel truth. There's been 4 women that come to mind that are in this room that had a huge role in shaping the direction that we took the company. Lyn St. James was the Grand Marshal the day I signed the papers at Watkins Glen, and was kind enough to share her vision of the sport and open my eyes to a number of things over the last 10 years. Kim McCullough was the head of marketing for Jaguar and Land Rover, and the deal we structured changed my company that allowed me to expand to do Trans Am and other things than just vintage racing. Probably the Connie Nyholm certainly was in charge of president and CEO of VIR, and at the time was the only woman really running a major racetrack, and she was kind enough to take a newbie like me in and rough me up a little bit as a business person, but she taught me more than she realizes. And then finally, on my actual company, I had 2 men running the company and 1 woman that reported to him when we started. That's how small the company was. The one woman's name was Kim, and every time I'd ask a question of my direct reports, who does the schedule, who does marketing, who does PR, who does this, it always says Kim. So now I just ask Kim, and by the way, I married her in between. So the point to all of this is I don't view what we're doing as heroic at all. I view what we're doing as just good business sense. And there is a ton of opportunity. On the racing side of it will have to come with institutionalized programs to get exposure, raise money, and put women and kids of color in a car. The business side, we're ready now, and there's frankly no excuse. The issue is people tend to look at a resume, and if you've done it before, then that's who they hire. And my words in this for 40 years in business, I would say hire the best person you can, even if they don't have the experience. If they bring the work ethic and passion, that's who you should hire. And that's what my company's been built on. So I hope that answers your question.
I'm going to take this really quick, and then you want something with it. Okay, is to tell her, where are you, Katie? Katie, where are you? Over here. You're over there. Okay. So you find out who runs the team, who runs the series, who runs the track. You meet them. You say you would like to meet them, and you look at them. You look in their eyes. You shake their hand. You have a conversation with them. You will find out in a relatively short amount of time whether they will become an ally or not. You know, you will develop the instinctive gut knowing this is a real person who's going to help me versus this is somebody giving me lip service. And so, you know, it's not easy, but it's not that hard either. You take initiative and you will find your allies.
I was just going to say, from a road racing perspective, and I imagine circle track, it's probably the same. Go to the local track. Go see this guy here and the people, because how many regions do you have? 100 regions or something out there?
115.
Yeah, 150. They're looking for volunteers. They're looking for someone with enthusiasm. And I know Mr. Doonan here and myself, I don't know anybody else on this well enough to know, that we went to SCCA racers as kids and got really excited about racing. And that's when we started meeting people and talking to people. And so it's my plug for the great work that SCCA did for at least other people here on the podium.
If I can add just one thought to that, because yes, 1,000 times yes. The 2 words that I would add to what Lyn said are be authentic and unapologetic. One of the things that we get when people come to us and say, hey, I want to work in this industry, I want to be in this space, it often starts with, I'm sorry. Especially, unfortunately, when women approach us. I'm sorry, this is just, can I have a second? I'm sorry, this is just how I am. Don't ever apologize for that. Be authentically who you are. State clearly what you want. I want to be a race car driver. I want to be a marketer. I want to be a team leader. I want to be John Doonan. That's what I want to be. And don't end it with, I'm sorry. End it with thank you. Unapologetic authenticity. Almost say it. Unapologetic authenticity goes so far in these conversations. When somebody shows up in our space and says, how can I help? That's real different than any other conversation.
That's so good. And I've had these, tell them what you want and need and why. Be clear, say thank you, come back with results afterward, after they've helped you. Find them and talk to them. I just got it, man. Okay, there was another hand up here.
Hi, my name is Maddie Wiles. I work for Chevy Racing. One thing that studies have shown is that, a lot of focus is on getting women in engineering, like at the college level, getting them internships, but often that's too late. Girls get discouraged in elementary school. It's even shown that teachers have biases against women when it comes to math and science. So I think a lot of us struggle with what are tangible ways of encouraging girls and people of color at that level, because I had a lot of support once I got into engineering school, once I got an internship, but I had to fight against many things to even get to that point. So what is something that all of us, there's a lot of powerful people in the room, what's a tangible way that we can work on that?
I guess similar to what Heyward did by opening up racetracks for people to come, I think we need to take our sport to them. Back several years ago, had the opportunity to initiate a STEM education program nationwide. We took our race cars to at least 2 high schools in every market with a driver, with an engineer, to explain what it is we're doing and how it is relevant to their classroom work. And just 1 week ago today, with a partnership we have with the EPA, Environmental Protection Agency, we reinitiated that program to take IMSA, in our case, to that high school level, and the awareness of what's possible in our sport. And we mentioned careers in PR and engineering and hospitality, and there's so many opportunities that people just aren't aware of, and I think that's incumbent on us to take our sport to them. They're not going to necessarily find it on their own.
Yeah, I agree. We have a program with the Boys and Girls Club, which is nationwide, that does the same thing. Essentially, they teaches them STEM. They come out to the racetrack. They see careers, right? What could I do in racing, right? And it's surprising to them. And then they get to do it in an environment that's exciting. So we're proud of that program. It's growing. We spend real dollars. It's not it is a pay for play. We're paying, as we should, because it's important. These are our future fans. These are future racers. These are our future engineers. And it's, getting them at a young age and having them grow is part of what we're doing. So we're proud of that program.
Thank you. You could be here tomorrow. Can you ask that same question to the educational pipeline group? Because I'm not an educational expert, but I would offer my response to be that if everybody in this room volunteered 1 day to go to this school that's in their area and talk about motorsports, even to 2nd and 3rd graders. I remember, I think it was preschoolers in Indianapolis, that I took a helmet and a steering wheel, and these kids just were going crazy, playing with this stuff. And I remember the team didn't want to give me the steering wheel because they said, "You know how much this thing costs? $50,000. I said, "These kids are not going to hurt you or steal your secrets of the steering wheel." But anyway, go to a school and just volunteer for a day, and I think that could, little bit by little bit. I think are we over that amount? Okay, so we're over 8 minutes. Thank you so very much, not just for coming, but for your leadership, for your passion, for caring, and for taking action. This time is right, and we're gonna help change the landscape of motorsports in a positive way. I absolutely believe it from my bones up. So thank you very, very much for your support and for coming today. Thank you.